What's up, Pikachus and Piplups? So, you think you know Pokemon Sword and Shield? The 8th generation of Pokemon games brought a lot of changes and innovations to the series, like Dynamaxing, the Wild Area, Pokemon Camp, max raid battles, and most importantly, the single stupidest villain plot the series has ever seen. Yes, even stupider than Archie and Maxie from Gen 3. Me like more water. Me like more land. Seriously, just what was that? Make like an HM slave and surf on down to the comment section so you can tell me to cut the crap, and then rock smash that like button with all your strength as we explore how a Rose by any other name would still be a moron. And in case you've recently been hit by Confuse Ray, spoilers ahead for Pokemon Sword and Shield. Okay, so Rose's whole deal is that he's worried that in 1,000 years, all the Dynamax energy will be used up, and society will basically collapse because Galar generates its electricity using Dynamax energy. So no more Dynamax means no more electricity. So to solve this, he awakens Eternatus, because Eternatus will replenish the amount of Dynamax energy in the universe. Now, shock of shocks, his plan doesn't work because they can't control Eternatus, because of course they can't. So the player has to come in and save the day. But even if it had worked, Rose was still willing to bring about the darkest day and cause tons of Pokemon to Dynamax and run amok, causing untold damage and, let's be real here, definitely killing a ton of people, all in order to solve this energy crisis. But there's one big, huge, Gigantamax-sized problem with this whole plan. It seems that Chairman Rose is unaware that, Pokemon exist? No, really, that may sound dumb, but think about it. Pokemon exist, and it's clear that they aren't bound by the laws of thermodynamics. Electric Pokemon can generate electric energy far, far in excess of the energy they consume from food. Hell, Pokemon like Magnezone don't even need to eat because they have no mouths, and yet they can still generate enormous amounts of electricity. A single Electivire can power a large city for a year, all by itself. You could power the entire Galar region with only a dozen Electivire. And to even get to that number, you have to count the Professor's Lab as a city needing its own Electivire. Not to mention Postwick and Wedgehurst are definitely too small to be called large cities, so they could easily share one power source. A dozen Pokemon to power an entire region. Hardly seems like that would be harder to pull off than awakening, battling, capturing, and controlling a legendary Pokemon whose whole deal is that it has infinite power. Pokemon generate more energy than they consume. You're literally ignoring the laws of physics and creating energy from nothing. It is quite literally impossible to ever run out of energy in a world where Pokemon exist. Hell, electric Pokemon aren't even the only source of energy you could harness. Solar power is still a thing, right? Why not set up a huge solar farm, Chairman Rose? And you don't even have to worry about not getting enough sun because the move Sunny Day exists. Wind turbines are a thing too, and if there's ever just not enough wind on a given day, again, Pokemon exist. The move Gust should be more than enough to keep the turbine spinning. Or Whirlwind, or Aeroblast, or Razor Wind, or Ominous Wind, or literally any move where a Pokemon creates wind, of which there are many. Fire-type Pokemon could be used to heat water into steam to run turbines. Water-type Pokemon could just pump out endless torrents of water to run turbines like a hydroelectric dam. Fighting-type Pokemon could manually spin a dynamo at insane speeds to generate electricity. Psychic types could make generators and turbines spin with their minds. There are endless ways to generate more power using Pokemon than those Pokemon consume. There is no way to run out of energy. And it's not like this is a new idea either. In the second episode of the anime, way back in the 90s, Ash visits a Pokemon Center that loses power and they use a bunch of Pikachu to provide backup power. In the Gen 1 games, Team Rocket powers their entire hideout with tons of energy-hungry electrical equipment and scientific gadgets using just 6 level 23 Electrode. And that hideout was bigger than half the cities in the game. There literally already is a Pokemon-powered electrical plant in Gen 1. This is an idea that is clearly well established as being common in the Pokemon world. With all this, there's no way Rose just never thought of any of this. Pokemon-based power plants exist already, so it's flat out impossible for Rose to genuinely have believed that they were going to run out of energy. Rose isn't an idiot, he's portrayed as being incredibly brilliant, and yet he just magically forgets that Pokemon exist and can be used to generate literally infinite amounts of power. So much so that he becomes convinced that the only way to save the region is to basically bring about the apocalypse in order to try to capture just one legendary Pokemon and use it for power. What? Now, maybe Rose is more concerned with running out of Dynamax energy to use for Pokemon battles rather than to generate electricity. Dynamax battles are Galar's big unique selling point and what brings in most of their tourism, which is a huge part of their economy. Perhaps he's worried that in 1,000 years, the Dynamax energy will run out and Galar's tourism industry will collapse. But But if that's the case, wouldn't it make more sense to be preserving as much Dynamax energy as possible, as opposed to needlessly wasting it on electrical generation? We're told that Rose has set up most of the Galar region to run off electricity generated from Dynamax energy. But if he's so worried about the Dynamax energy running out, why would he be using it to make electricity? Why would he ever have set things up that way to begin with? Transitioning the region to traditional electrical generation would actually conserve Dynamax energy, because every bit of it not used on electrical generation is another bit that can be used for Dynamax battles. So whether his concern is losing the region's tourism generating Dynamax battles or losing its electrical generation capacity, either way it makes no sense to not be putting all of his effort into transitioning to traditional electrical generation. What all this effectively means is that everything in the story after you beat Raihan the second time just doesn't count. Like, Rose just objectively would not have believed that, so he never would have done what he did, so that whole part of the story is basically just invalid. None of those events would have happened if Rose didn't believe there was an energy crisis, and he never would have believed that, so none of those events could have happened. Now, a lot of people have noted that the end of the game seems rushed. I mean, we get a still image instead of a cutscene for a major story moment. And what the heck even was SYTYK Myth? They just replaced an entire city full of people with a single corridor and a handful of battles. So some may argue that Rose's plan was originally going to make sense, but they had to cut a lot of content for time in order to get the game out by its intended release date. But the issue is that no amount of time to work on the endgame could have fixed this. The entire foundation of Rose's plan makes no sense. Everything he does from the very beginning of the game is motivated by his fear of this looming energy crisis, but that energy crisis just doesn't exist, and he would never have believed that it existed, so his whole storyline from the start was fundamentally broken. What could have fixed this is simply giving Rose a different motivation altogether for wanting to awaken and control Eternatus. Off the top of my head, maybe say that the Galar region will be destroyed when the Dynamax energy runs out, or say that he wants to use Eternatus to generate a ton of Dynamax energy all at once to try and invent some new transformation, even bigger and stronger than Dynamax or Gigantamax, like, I don't know, Turbo Hypermax or something. Or just say that he wants Eternatus to take over the world like half the other game's antagonists. Any of these motivations for wanting to awaken Eternatus would make sense and would completely fix the endgame. So the decision to stick with the whole energy run out in 1,000 years plot for Chairman Rose just makes zero sense. It just goes to show you, every rose has its thorn, and this one is a real thorn in the side of good writing. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe, hit the bell, and all the other YouTube things that the algorithm basically forces us to say. And maybe check out my other video about what everybody gets wrong about the limits of Goku's strength, or my other video about why the ending of Death Note is mathematically impossible. Anyway, this has been So You Think You Know, and now you do know.